Welcome back to a long overdue episode of Advancing Man Project. And today I have a very, very special guest that I'm really excited to talk about, and that's John Duquesne, the founder and CEO of Dragon Door Publications. If you're not familiar with Dragon Door or John Duquesne, it's because you're just not familiar with kettlebells, really. John has a roots, or his roots are in martial arts, Tai Chi, Qigong. He's been practicing that for decades. And in the early 2000s, he partnered up with Pavel Tsatsouline, started designing and manufacturing the first kettlebells that were available in the United States. From there, grew into the RKC certification, which I attended in 2003, which is really surreal for me to say because that's been 22, 23 years ago since I started doing stuff with kettlebells. And the RKC continues to be going strong. Dragon Door has evolved over the years, and I'll let John tell more about the specifics of that, to include things that have to do with body weight training, calisthenics, isometric stuff that is currently out there. And I haven't talked to John for a long time, and face to face at all. And I'm really excited to have John on the the show today. John, I appreciate you taking time to be out of here. It is an honor to have you on.
Thank you, Dave, and it's really great to connect with you again after all this time and
Yeah,
all our history together.
and I don't say this lightly. I know that sometimes I have the ability to exaggerate things, but anyone who is in the United States today, right now in 2025, that sees a kettlebell or an image of a kettlebell or picks up a kettlebell or has anything to do with a kettlebell, we can trace it back directly to the work that you did early on with the RKC and manufacturing kettlebell and getting it out to the public. And I don't think the importance of your role in that could be overstated. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you very
Dave.
much. But let's back up a little bit. I mean, besides being the impetus behind the modern kettlebell resurgence, because no one knew what the things were for decades. Um, let's back up a little bit. Before Dragon Door became what it is now, what was the original vision that you had for it?
So, backing up even more, I've had a natural enthusiasm, certainly since my 20s, a natural propensity to share my enthusiasms for whatever I'm enthusiastic about. I love the word enthusiasm, by the way. It means filled with the divine. So I think it's a very cool kind of spiritual word to use in connection with kind of sharing what you love. And my great passions in my 20s had to do with martial arts. And I went to an ashram in India in when I was 25, and I was introduced there to Qigong and Tai Chi, and I fell in love with everything to do with Tai Chi and Qigong. So I immediately became a kind of a proselytizer for the health benefits, and also, I was a spiritual aspirant, basically, always have been, and everything that I've done in to do with movement and strength training and martial arts finally has a kind of a spiritual bent to it, a desire to become enlightened or become certainly more spiritually aligned. So that was kind of the route that led me eventually to. I was asked by a Tai Chi teacher in Minnesota if I'd like to start a publishing company with him. He'd had a small company that had gone down. He published a couple of books based on a lineage through a gentleman called Master T.T. Liang, who I actually had already heard about. T.T. Liang was a renowned figure in the Tai Chi world. He was one of the first great Yang stylists to promote in this country. So, kind of impetuously, back in 91, I agreed to start a publishing company and came out with a book called Cultivating the Qi, which was based on the Yang family's Qigong secrets, essentially. That book did very well. Then we did another book. I love the title, Imagination Becomes Reality. And that is so much what Tai Chi and internal martial arts, and also, of course, we'll get to strength training is all about finally.
I love that. I did not know that you had a book that had that title. And in the past, I don't know, 14, 15, 16 years, I have been exposed to Neville Goddard, if you're familiar
Okay.
with his work at
No,
all. And
no.
and that, well, it hit like if you Google Neville Goddard quotes,
Hmm.
imagination becomes reality is one of the first things that'll pop up. I have a quote on the
Okay.
wall over here that says, every stage of man's progress is made by the conscious exercise of imagination, matching the inner speech to fulfilled desire. So it's,
I love it.
yeah,
Yes.
uh,
So that was like a central message in
definitely.
my kind of Tai Chi lineage. So what happened with this? So the original vision there was based on the kind of Taoist esoteric principles of working, cultivating your entire being, like cultivating physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. That you saw yourself as a ongoing work of art to be cultivated and refined. So that was kind of the original vision for Dragon Door. What happened in terms of kind of promoting that material, I had no background in business. I had no background in marketing, writing ad copy, but I had my passion and my enthusiasm. So what I elected to do, fortunately, I had some good mentors, was I developed a physical catalog. Those were the days, when we had paper.
Right.
And I started to build up a catalog of esoteric resources, qigong, herbs, all sort of Chinese related, basically. And it was tough. I mean, trying to market highly esoteric material like that is very difficult. But I really persevered and built up this catalog and struggled as a publisher because it was very hard to truly make a living selling qigong and tai chi resources. And then the shift. I was teaching qigong out of my own love, and it was about I think 1995. I was at a place locally in Minneapolis called the Open U, teaching qigong, and a very charismatic young Russian suddenly showed up on the scene named Pavel Tsatsouline. And he was, I've always seen him as a master marketer in his own right. He does not like to people to know about that part of himself, but he was a very, very brilliant marketer. He understood positioning very well. He was very brand conscious, and he was a great actor and entertainer, basically. And I saw that right away. I went to a flexibility workshop. There were ballerinas, grizzled old vets, bodybuilders, every imaginable kind of person, and he was getting them results. And I saw something very charismatic there. Um, and he had this whole shtick right from the beginning. He had T-shirts that said "Body by Stalin," um, which was kind of outrageous. He was already into the evil Russian idea, and great credit to him. I learned to run with all that, and it was a great kind of marriage of a partnership, rather like say Mick Jagger and Keith Richards getting together. Where we kind of hit it off, and I approached him and said, "Would you like to have your material published?" And he was very quiet about it and said, "Yes, that would be great." And we came out with the first ever book with Pavel was Beyond Stretching, and people immediately became very interested. Um, he and I shared. He had obviously much more of an enthusiasm for heavy duty strength training. I had always been into strength training, but not on the level that Pavel had been. Essentially, when he came over, I think when I met him, he had been probably about 2 years as a strength and conditioning trainer for Spetsnaz, and that was it. He managed to jump ship and get over to the States. So he was very, very young, and he was actually very cagey about his age in those days. He didn't want anyone to know how young he was because naturally people wouldn't really take him seriously. But very, very brilliant, obviously. So we did very well with beyond stretching. Pavel took my Qigong classes, liked them very much. And one of the things that I introduced him to was high tension isometric training in Qigong, um, otherwise known as Iron Shirt. And
Hmm.
there was a system that he was very struck. It was Xu Liang, who I'd been studying with. And Xu Liang had been brought up in communist China and very hard conditions. He'd never touched a weight in his life, but he'd been doing iron shirt qigong since the age of 5 with his grandfather. And he was finally got to college and he was in the weight room and just kind of casually picked up a massive amount of weight and put it over his head. The local coach saw that and was astounded. He said, "So you've been training weights for a long time?" He said, "No, I've never touched a weight in my life." And I told that story to Pavel, and he lit up. You know,
Hmm.
one of Pavel's great abilities was he was able to take a simple kind of basically a reaffirmation of what he already knew that would kind of trigger him to really work on something. And the big, big, big initial impetus, which did lead to, I think, part of the success of the kettlebell system was the understanding of how important it is to properly generate tension for strength. And he really understood that deeply, and out came power to the people.
Hmm.
So the next kind of step towards kettlebells was a very successful book, Power to the People, which just used basically 2 exercises, typical of Pavel, where the real emphasis was on how do you really make yourself stronger, not just by lifting a lot, but what's behind it. So Power to the People came out, and we were starting to build a significant following um, as a result of our of what we were up to. Um, in 1998, Pavel said, "You know, John, when I was with Spetsnaz and that kind of period, I trained with these things called kettlebells. Do you think we could do anything with them in America?" And I said, "Sure, let's look at that." I mean, there was Iron Mind had an adjustable kettlebell. That was it. There were no books, no videos, no systems, nothing. And Pavel was kind of hesitant, and I was hesitant too. But he had just got some kettlebells from a Russian hockey player, and they were the old style with the hollow inside. You put weight inside, and they became the kind of Girovoy type lifting kettlebells. And there was no such thing as what we decided to manufacture. Said, okay, let's go for this. Found a foundry in St. Paul, Minnesota. Founded as a gentleman who understood how to create the templates for these kettlebells, and we thought, let's get away from the hollow kettlebells. Let's come out with a new design where they're solid. So we were the first people ever, as far as I know, in the world to come out with it's the 16 kilo kettlebell. Did not exist in Russia in that format. So we did that. We did a 24 kilo, we did a 32, and those were kind of very classic weight sizes for the Russians. So we made these in the foundry in St. Paul, and then a huge, huge part of our success, I believe, which I am very proud of, was that I had originally, before I started the Tai Chi publishing company, I was the director of the certification board for chemical competency counselors. And the big insight that I got, the CD counselors, chemical dependency counselors, were almost all recovering addicts. Not exactly credible folk a lot of the time. They were recently out of prison, whatever. They'd been practicing drugs for a long time. So part of the certification system's idea was how do we give ourselves credibility? So you build what basically a certification system allows you to anoint yourself as the authority. You say, "Come to us, we'll test you, and we will bless you, my child." And you will now be a disciple, an acolyte, however you want to put it, a proselytizer. So
Go
it
forth and multiply.
yes, exactly. So that was huge because what we did is we set up an authority system. And, Pavel, totally brilliant gentleman. I gave him the idea of the certification, and then it was a matter of filling in the blanks, like what are we going to test people on? The snatch, the swing, etc., etc.
Mhm.
And it started out, with a very, very limited program, really, that was based on Pavel's original experience with kettlebells. And it immediately had resonance. So we came out with a very kind of iconic first book and a first video called the Russian Kettlebell Challenge that kind of played up the whole love of the secrets that the Russians somehow held, whether or not they really did.
Right.
We were able to kind of, with a lot of good hyperventilating, make it exciting for people. And I think the combination of, what was so significant was not only that it was authoritative, but it was a system that really worked. It was something that people were going to get fantastic results with. So you can hyperventilate and market all you want, but you better darn well have something that will truly deliver. And the
Yeah.
beauty, as we'll discuss in a bit, is the beauty of the kettlebells is they truly deliver.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that one of my favorite events that I ever attended during my entire tenure with the RKC was you did in, I believe it was in San Diego, the marketing mastermind intensive.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yes,
I
yes.
love that. And I remember, I'm paraphrasing something you said there, that if you have great marketing and an inferior product, you will go out of business more quickly. So yeah.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
So to that point, obviously, there was a superior product in both the educational side of things and also in the kettlebells. I know that even back then, 25-ish years ago, you were part of the guarantee was a lifetime guarantee. And I've got two 24-kilo kettlebells, one 16 kilo and one 32 kilo that are from those early years
Wow, that's
that,
fantastic.
that are not stamped with any logo. It just has the weight on each side of it. That's how
Wow,
they are. And I still have
wow.
them. And I've thrown some paint on them here and there, but
Yeah,
yeah, and they're outside in a shed
amazing.
where
Yeah,
I train. I mean, they were inside for years, but for the past 7 or 8 years, they've been outside, and
amazing.
and they work just as well now as they did the day that I got them. So superior
Fantastic.
stuff for sure. So the when you were building Dragon Door up, it it evolved from a company obviously into like a culture. And I'm curious, and I know that you um being a student of good marketing, a student of people like Dan Kennedy and that whole ecosystem, uh, you don't do anything uh, that isn't, if not planned, at least any contingencies or that would be foreseeable or taken into account. So how much of building it from a company into an out and out culture was intentional, and how did you go about doing that? And how do you continue to do that now when the market is inundated? Because I know back then, it's like you said, if you want to know about kettlebells, you went on Yahoo or Ask Jeeves. This like predates Google. And
Right.
and there was nothing there really, except maybe like I remember the first things that I ever saw about it that weren't Dragon Door related had to do with Herman Gerner. and
Okay.
who was an old strongman from back in the day. Um, like how intentional was that to build it up as a culture?
Well, I think a lot of it, yes, it was intentional up to a point. Definitely, we were being organic in the way things developed. But Pavel and I both had an original interest in martial arts, and there's a sense, or in any martial arts, there's a strong community. There's a strong sense of camaraderie. You're doing tough stuff together to achieve certain results together. So there's a very strong kind of bond that gets established, whether you're in jujitsu or taekwondo or some esoteric Chinese martial art. There's a stress on both respect for the teacher, but also respect for each other and for the community that you're training with. And that carried over. I think one of the very big, something that was very intentional was that we set up a forum to support the whole kettlebell movement. And the forum was huge in the first few years. Later on, forums seemed to go by the way, but there was a tremendous amount of excitement. And there were a lot of very intelligent and well-trained people who joined the forum. And there was this free exchange of information. Nothing was really being kept hidden. So I think the culture started to develop very strongly from that. And I credit myself and Pavel in his way in kind of stoking the culture and feeding it. The certifications were always, more and more high end. We'd have special dinners for the instructors. We'd have group dinners. There was a meet. There was a meet and greet the night before. There were lots of different ways. We would invite people to write articles, to speak. We had little competitions. There was a sense of us all kind of working together to achieve something special. And the culture, of course, we what was very important was to have, if you're going to have a culture, you have your own language, you have your own emphases, and those, they can become cult-like. That definitely happened with the RKC, where I came out from my background in understanding the difference in hard style and soft style. Um, I thought, well, hardstyle is a great name for a catalog, and we, came out with hardstyle as the name of our catalog, and stressed kettlebell use as a hardstyle like endeavor, and people jumped on that. So really, it was part of building of the culture, is seeing what is really sparking people's true passion and interest. And hardstyle became kind of an amazing rallying cry. So we kind of put it out there, and then it was taken up.
Right.
And then we would feed that. And Pavel, of course, in his way, was, as I mentioned, he's a great actor. He's a great entertainer. He had a shtick. I knew him extremely well personally and had dinner with him on a regular basis. I've seen him be a kind of normal human being. And then he had the ability to, like a lot of most successful people in the entertainment world, the fitness world, they or great chefs, they know how to turn it on, and he has that quality.
Hmm.
So he, in his way, I think what I also saw was he was very attuned to our different instructors' special talents and interests, and he would grow them. He would, and we deliberately promoted. We'd put a lot of special people on the front cover of the catalog. We'd do big interviews with them. This backfired in many cases later. We had disenchanted instructors who attacked us, tried to bring us down. We can talk
Hmm.
about that a bit more later. But the positive side of it was that we made heroes out of a lot of our people. And heroes come in all shapes and sizes. And I think in a culture, what was important for us in our culture was to have people feel that they belonged to something that was really special, and we were recognizing them as being special. So particularly with the whole system of the team leaders and the seniors and the masters, we were giving a very, very strong thumbs up to
Hmm.
these individuals, promoting them as heroes. But also just anyone, who got results became a hero that could inspire other people. There's always this classic journey that I talk about in when I teach marketing, is you have a challenge that has to be met, and then the right person shows up with the right system. You incorporate that, and then you come out the other side. You have the solution, and you triumph. So yes, it's kind of it was tentative in many ways, but I think part of the skill, if, for anyone who wants to build a culture or build a successful business, is opportunities will present themselves to you. And the universe will say, well, how about the forum? How about the certification? How about this? It's what you then do with it. Do you stoke the fire, or do you just move on and kind of miss the opportunity? So I think it's kind of mixed. It was planned up to a point, but then it's a matter of kind of going very much with the flow. As we got to the point where people were so culture into the culture that they were actually tattooing themselves with kettlebells. Yeah, there you are. Amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah, and very beautiful.
thank you.
And that is very heartening. I think that I feel very heartened by the way how robust the culture did become.
Yeah. Did you in those early days when you were
Yeah.
were planning it out, did you ever think that it would become such a global movement that like you can go check into a hotel in a
Oh
medium-sized
yeah.
city now, and in the fitness center there'll be a few kettlebells laying around in there.
Yeah, and like wherever you go, a bus will pass by, and there's a kettlebell that's basically synonymous with fitness.
Yep.
I'd say absolutely not. That we thought, and we marketed this. We're both, Pavel and I, are very male oriented in our approach. At least initially, we both were. I later changed, but the emphasis was we were expecting, based on the history of kettlebells with strong men and then the Russian special forces and what have you, that it was a very, very serious endeavor that would only attract law enforcement, military, people who were strong men, people who were really into kind of the toughest type of training. And yes, we got a ton of those people and they became inspirational leaders. However, what I think really jump started it globally was that it was extremely successful with women. And I've always thought that a lot of it was kettlebells don't necessarily for women bulk them up. It tones the heck out of them. Women were very attracted to the fact they could become very well conditioned, but beyond what you'd get from yoga or aerobics, you would get this very, very strong body and firm in the areas that matter to women. They know just basically you want to have a nice, tight, firm butt, tight midsection, good thighs, firm abdomen, and and a back that is kind of reasonably muscular, and that became very desirable and sexy. It was like a new style of female body was available that was beyond what you could get
Hmm.
from aerobics and yoga and some of the more traditional outlets for the ladies. So eventually a kettlebell class would be 60, 70% women. I think we didn't, I think Pavel was very oriented, more than me probably, to individual training. He was very big on training just a particular person for whatever reason. What became very big, and I think moved it to being global, was the group classes. That there were instructors who became adept at teaching a group, and then of course partly to our surprise, welcome surprise, it became something that went beyond the United States. That it became very big in England very quickly. And it was interesting to see what countries, not France, came very big in Italy, Germany eventually, but Spain, no. It was very interesting to see. Mexico, no. Um, China loved them. Japan loved them. There's cultures, Korea loved them. And then, we've reached a point where you can reasonably say that tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people have benefited from kettlebells. So no, we had no idea that it was going to grow to be what it was. Um, and it's extremely heartening and wonderful that it did.
Mhm.
I think that on a business level, Pavel and I initially were very naive about what we had. We just didn't realize the potential. I don't think we protected our IP very well originally. I mean, literally everyone and their brother started to come out with certification systems based on our material, more or less, and it happened very quickly. So, oh well, you know, we still benefited very well financially over the years. And more than anything, I think it was just so wonderful to see people often getting kind of life-saving results from life changing results as
Yeah.
a result of their practice.
Yeah.
And
Go ahead.
I think the other thing to stress is the power of the system. That what was so great about the RKC and the HKC and then whatever it evolved into was that it was a very, very carefully organized system of progressive exercises. There's a phrase in the addiction recovery world: it works if you work it.
Mhm.
And we had a system that was that, that the wisdom was there, the strength wisdom was sitting there, and if you worked it, it would happen for you.
Yeah. I I have often wondered what made that kind of training resonate so deeply with so many people, especially back in the early 2000s. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts about that as well. But I see it as um, things like CrossFit, particularly the CrossFit Games, where people get together and compete, and they go through that mutual passing through the fire that you mentioned
Mm-hmm.
earlier. Things like Spartan races and
Mm-hmm.
obstacle courses and stuff like that. I think all of those things that are semi-competitive, but most of the people who are doing it are there not competing to win, but competing against a former version of themselves to become
Yes.
better and
Yes.
to treat it as an individualized thing like that. I don't like the phrase "I only compete against myself."
Mm-hmm.
Because someone has to win and someone has to lose that.
Yes.
What I like is the idea of I am competing against my previous best, and
Nice.
that's how I
Yeah.
reconcile that
Yeah.
in my mind.
Yeah.
But um, I, I I think that the impact that those, especially the early certifications in, from 2002 to probably 2007, 2008, somewhere around in there, before all these other things started showing up on the scene, had a direct impact on the growth in popularity of things like the CrossFit Games and the Spartan races and things like that. My son will be 7 on Friday, and he did his first Spartan race
Oh wow, good for him. Wow.
and little kids version of it and stuff. And one of the things that they had to do, one of the obstacles they had to do in the kids version is they would get to a particular point and they had to farmers carry, I think it was probably a 12-kilo kettlebell
Okay.
down and around and then switch hands and come back or something like that. And I'm like,
Fantastic. Yeah. And I'm
so,
sure he aced that.
no, he
Yeah, I've
got,
seen social media posts of you and your kids, and it's very
yeah,
heartening.
he's all about it. He
Yeah.
absolutely loves it. He's pressing an 8-kilo kettlebell without much trouble,
Nice.
and he's
Fantastic.
deadlifting 32 kilo, which is about body weight,
Wow.
which is great.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but how did it feel seeing it resonate so deeply with so many people? And like you said, the areas that mainstream fitness, particularly with women, that it tells them that they should be chasing. A kettlebell swing addresses almost all of that.
Exactly.
And
Yes.
and
So
and so it resonated with people. But how did it feel seeing it get picked up by women and by mainstream stuff, and seeing that kind of influence, that you've got a group of kids that are age 5 to 8 that are carrying farmers carrying kettlebells as part of a Spartan race now, and we
no,
trace it.
it's very inspiring and very heartening.
Yeah.
And I remember, I think it was Doug Nepedal, one of our previous instructors, great guy.
Hmm.
And he used to be a bodybuilder.
Hmm.
And he said how absolutely miserable he was as he pumped himself full of protein powders and struggled to get bigger and bigger and bigger. In fact, they came out with the term bigorexia for people who are always trying to grow, grow, grow. And there was a lot of, I think, um, misery really in the culture around bodybuilding. There was a lot of misinformation about what really would give you good results. And there was not a lot of functional training happening at that time. The machines were very dominant. It was that period. So I think that kettlebells were very liberating for a lot of people. The system was liberating, and also the fact that you had this gym in one hand, that you didn't have to go to the gym. You could do it by yourself or in a group, and it could meet all your needs. You could get, and I think another thing that's lovely, a lot of people would go to the gym, particularly men, and they would mainly work out to get, bigger biceps, stronger thighs, whatever. Um, but they would not pay attention to their conditioning. The great thing about kettlebells was you got the whole package. You
Correct.
became supremely conditioned. I mean, you cannot mess around with hundreds of snatches of weight and not get into fantastic conditioning, and at the same time get very strong. And of course, the other thing was the increase in functionality in your life. The great phrase that came up that was part of our culture was the "what the hell" effect,
Yep.
which was supreme for kettlebells. Is that where else was there a device that you could use? You could do your swings, and the next thing you knew, you were a better baseball player, you were a
Right.
better football player, you were running faster, you were hitting harder. You were more, your grip was surprisingly stronger. People were more scared to touch you. Uh, all of that became, I think, the contribution to why kettlebells became, so popular, and
Yeah.
such a release from what people had had to deal with before, where again the training systems were such a mess. Frankly, people really weren't sure what to do. And
Right.
the great thing about RKC and everything that came from that was you had a very, very defined program to work with that got these amazing results.
My own personal discussion of the what the hell effect, and there are many examples of it showing up both
Hmm.
in my own training and in people that I've worked with as students and clients. But the one that I really like to throw out from time to time is not the way that the term what the hell effect is originally intended. When I first found out about kettlebells and anything related to it, it was from an ad that you were running in Muscle Media magazine that Bill
Oh
Phillips,
yeah, I remember those ads.
Body
Yeah.
for Life. Yeah.
By the
Um,
way, I got to interrupt. Muscle media was huge for us.
yeah.
That was huge. Yeah, Powell having regular columns in there, huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
That's fine. That's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah.
But I remember seeing it in Muscle Media magazine. And at the time, I was going to the gym and I was doing a mix of some barbell stuff, but a lot of machine stuff. I was um in the high intensity Mike Mincer, Dorian Yates
Oh yeah.
bodybuilding
Hmm.
philosophical approach. And an acquaintance of mine had purchased a 16 kilo kettlebell, which is one of the ones that I have now. I got it from him years later, and the VHS of that original Russian Kettlebell Challenge video that was a Dragon. And I took it home and shoved it in the VCR and watched it, and thought this can't be that hard. So I took the 16 kilo out into the front yard, and I was very proud of myself for this. I snatched it poorly, I'm sure, but I
Hmm.
snatched it 10 times with my right arm and then managed to switch hands without dropping it on a swing and snatch
Impressive.
10 times with my left hand, which was for my first time doing snatches. I felt really good about that. And then I set it down and I'm like, okay. And then I had to sit down and I had to lay down in my yard and literally was thinking buzzards are going to come and start eating me before I even am done dying here. This is what the hell just happened to me? What the hell
Wow.
have I done to myself? Because,
Wow.
I was moving fairly heavy weights in the gym, but nothing had ever given me that combination of both muscular fatigue and cardiovascular impact that was like
Mm.
running sprints when I was playing high school football, but full body.
Yeah,
And
totally.
that moment was very pivotal for me personally because I had a choice to make then. Do I keep doing this thing that I've been doing that I think I know about that isn't really working very well? I never really wanted to admit that that high intensity bodybuilding stuff wasn't getting me where I wanted to go.
Mm.
Or do I want to embrace this? Because I was practicing martial arts at the time too, big fan of Bruce Lee and his conditioning approaches, and so I could see that there was something about this thing. And then I spoke with my friend after that, and he's like, "Let's go to the certification. They're having this event." And so 2003, that's how I showed up, and that's where I first met you and Pavel and you know uh, everyone associated with that
All
stuff.
the
So
lads.
the effect for me was like, "What the hell have I gotten myself into?"
Yeah.
But had I decided I don't want to feel this tired. I think I want a different way. Um, but yeah, it was a big deal. Now, you've always you spoke earlier about your martial
Oh,
arts.
can I interrupt you? Sorry. Yeah,
Please
just
do, yeah.
getting back to how do I feel about CrossFit and
Sure, 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 sure.
that kind of the mainstream. Only, like yes, sometimes would wince or cringe at where people were hurting themselves a lot because they were overdoing it with poor technique. But finally, you know, all boats rise as the sea rises. That I welcomed the fact that so many more people were being exposed and getting enthusiastic about working out in an intense way and still getting very good results. So more power to it that many people were excited. So I'm all for, even if the training was diluted in some way and it wasn't quite what we thought was perfect, we were able to assert our authority to those who wanted to listen. And so it benefited everyone in one way or the other.
Now, were there specific moments along the way where you thought that the essence of what the kettlebell training was really about was being watered down or misunderstood by people?
Oh, sure. Yes. Yes. I mean, that was happening. But again, that's okay.
Right.
It's like what happened to some of the Korean martial arts when they came over here. There was a joke that someone would leave Korea as a first degree black belt and arrive as a ninth degree black belt
Yeah.
and set up his own system. And there was a lot of marketing. The whole belt creation of the belt system was very slick marketing. But look what it did. It got a lot of little kids, both boys and girls, into self-defense. And maybe they didn't have the very best training, but if they persevered, they would find a better trainer. So I'm cool with systems, seeing that yes, there are people who, oh yeah, I do kettlebells, and you see what they're doing, you go, oh dear.
Right.
But at least they're doing that much,
Right.
and then at least they're possibly correctable. So
Yeah.
no, I'm fine with that. I'm
Yeah.
fine
That
with it.
that that makes me think of I'm paraphrasing this, but there's a um one of the martial arts that I have put time and effort and energy into over the years is called Hoshin Budo, and it was created by a man named Dr. Glenn Morris. And I'm pretty sure we've had
Oh
conversations
sure,
before,
yes, yes,
who wrote the book Path Notes of an American Ninja Master. But
yes.
he saw something very similar as to what you just described happening with specifically the Nimpo martial arts coming out of Japan when because he's been gone for nearly 20 years. So he was doing this in the 80s and early 90s when the ninja boom happened. For
Yeah.
anyone who's old enough to remember that, when there was Real Ninja magazine and
Yeah.
all the secrets of invisibility right there for free
Yeah.
that you could buy it at the grocery store. But he had a saying that he was completely unconcerned about people diluting stuff. He said, "The bad ninja go away." And what I always
Yeah.
took from that is, like you said, the people who dilute stuff down and try to use it as a hey, look at me self-promotion thing to make a quick buck, and they don't have the understanding or the passion or the drive or the vision that you put into it. They've got about a year and a half to 2 years shelf life before,
Hmm.
like we said earlier, bad marketing makes you go out of business quicker. So
Yeah.
these people who would take honestly, it reminds me, if you've ever driven past a Burger King, you would swear they were cooking steak there if you just smell it. But that's not
Mm.
what's going on, right?
Yeah.
So if you go in expecting to get a nice
Well,
steak,
I'm just suddenly thinking of Kiss.
yes,
Kiss was so brilliant at marketing themselves, and they embraced all the cover bands, all the kind of goofy versions of Kiss that came out because it only helped them.
yep.
They welcomed it and let them thrive.
And you actually turned me on to Gene Simmons' autobiography
Yes.
years
Oh
ago.
my God, so
Great
good.
book, great read.
Yes.
And you were
Yes.
talking about
So
how
wise.
even when he was a child in Israel, he was like selling water to soldiers or something to
Well,
help it.
selling cactus, like he would strip the thorns, the spikes off cactus and sell them to the troops,
Right.
and then take the money back to his mother because his alcoholic dad had left them.
Yeah. And did you
Yeah.
see that recently, like in the past few months, Gene and Paul have sold Kiss?
Oh no, no, I
I'm not
didn't know
sure who
that.
bought it, but I remember seeing quick little interview clip, like a reel or something, with Paul Stanley, and he said they sold Kiss, all of it, for $350 million.
Wow, wow.
And which goes along with what I've been saying since their last tour in '94. Um, because the band that went out and toured last time, it was Gene and Paul were the only two original members, but they had two other people in the same makeup playing the same roles as the band had in the '70s. And I'm like, well, they could continue this in perpetuity with just they get someone who can sing and play the
Yeah,
same way that Gene and Paul sing and play. And Kiss could be immortal. We could be 200 years from now looking back at like how many people have been the demon in Kiss,
yeah. And it said, like he said, we're not a band, we're a brand,
Yes,
right? That was his one of
yes.
his
And I remember
astute comments.
it may have been in that book or it might have been in an interview with him. He said all the other bands when we formed wanted to be the Beatles. We wanted to be Coca-Cola.
Interesting. I
Which
love
was
it.
nice.
Very
Yeah.
astute. Very astute.
Yeah. Um, and I think that I realize we're on a tangent now too, but I think that a very similar thing happened. We were talking before I started recording and about Ozzy Osbourne and Black Sabbath.
Hmm.
I think that Ozzy achieved that same kind of status
Sure,
where
sure.
and um the idea of it's not a band, it's a business. I think Sharon was instrumental in that, his wife. Like I don't think
Mm,
any of the stuff from the time he left Black Sabbath on would have happened the way it had if she hadn't been involved in that. And then, of course,
mm,
another thing that comes to mind is Iron Maiden. Um, they continue to thrive in a world in a music business that doesn't support that kind of music in terms of heavy radio play or videos or
hmm.
anything like that. But they continue to tour, they continue to thrive, and they continue to be profitable. And I saw, I'm not sure which member or if it was a band member or if it was management that said this, that someone asked them a question about how do you continue to thrive in this circumstance, in these circumstances in the music business when the business itself doesn't look like it should support you. And the person being questioned's response was, well, the problem with what you're asking is you think we're in the music business. We're not. We're in the Iron Maiden business.
Oh, amazing. I love it. Yes.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so and I have always loved and respected that you bring. that into the mix with okay, yes, we're talking about health and fitness, we're talking about kettlebells, but you've always not just been in the health and fitness business, not just in the kettlebell business, you've been in the dragon door business
Yes.
and
Yes. Yes.
establishing yourself, just the idea of creating a certification and establishing yourself as the authority. um it just that's the way. I mean, that just makes so much sense.
Hmm.
And I also love that you've always blended, along with the strength and fitness stuff, like an artistic or philosophical or even metaphysical mindset,
Hmm.
some spirituality into it. That's something that I've always enjoyed about conversations with you or reading things that you've written, because I had martial art experience. I had qigong experience before I ever knew what a kettlebell was. So that was definitely part of the hook
Yeah.
that brought me into the mix
Yes.
20
Totally.
something years ago. How do you see the relationship between the physical strength side of things and then the more spiritual or esoteric side of things?
Well, I'd like to. There's a book that I really enjoyed called Go, which was based on getting in touch with our primal wiring, whether it be diet or movement or whatever. And they interviewed a gentleman, a neuroscientist, and he came out with a statement that I absolutely loved that relates to this. He said, that which we call thinking is the evolutionary internalization of movement.
Mm,
And what he posits is that human beings became as successful animals as they did become over any other animal as a result of building their movement skills. Humans were able to outrun any animal over time, like be it an antelope or a cheetah. We were far, far more skillful in our dexterity and what we could do with our hands. We developed immensely complex movement systems. What that took for the brain was we had to develop very large brains to handle the sophistication of our movement skills, and that in turn actually takes a long time to for a child to develop fully. Um, what they're saying is the problem these days is that people have are no longer operating with the variety of movement skills that they are wired to use. So there's a lot of dysfunction happening in the world as a result of now of our lack of movement. You and I both share a love of movement. You know, part of my huge attraction to movements and to martial arts and other styles since my mid 20s was I now realize the variety and skill building of movement, and that's tremendously therapeutic. So we are, I understand about strength coming first. That's a very good perspective. Strong first. In many ways, I think movement first, and that we are our exceptional attributes as human beings are lies in our functional movement. So I think that one of the things that I gained, and I think you gained from an understanding in the esoteric worlds of Qigong and internal martial arts and so on, is the supreme value of building movement skills at a very sophisticated level. And Bruce Lee is a nice example of that too, in a more popular dimension. So the tie-in is that you see that if you want to be, and the Greeks and Romans understood it, mens sane, I forgot how that goes. In healthy body, healthy mind was the translation. Um, you to be spiritually, Zen in Japan understood this in their extreme emphasis on physical endurance and activities, is that you to be spiritually evolved, you need also to be physically involved. You need to integrate your every aspect of what you are as a human being. So strength translates backwards and forwards, like it's a sympathetic resonance. You build your physical strength, you build your spiritual strength, and vice versa. So it's this kind of emphasis on being a complete person and an emphasis on building your resilience against any kind of a challenge, whether it be, and this applies to being, your emotional challenges, whatever it is. There's a therapy that automatically will happen if you do this. And I was very struck in that same book. There's the person who I always forget his name, Dutch psychiatrist who came up with PTSD as a designation. The authors asked him, well, you've been dealing with trauma victims now for whatever it is, 20, 25 years. You came up with PTSD as a term. What do you think makes the biggest difference therapeutically for people suffering from PTSD? And he said, well, forget talk therapy. He said social movement is where it's at. And social movement is working in martial arts, partner dancing, communal dancing. A lot of original Qigong was, shamanic level Qigong was communal dancing and free-form movement that was very healing. So I've been rambling a little bit here, but basically it's like the way that we get back to our kind of animal primal roots really here is that you can't separate your spiritual aspirations from your physical aspirations or your emotion. They all tie in together. Mm. So move. And I was thinking when I was prepping for our talk today, I was remembering that was one of the great contributions that Gray Cook made. Mm-hmm. Was like beautiful movement. Calisthenics means beautiful movement. Is that, and he had this terrific, emphasis on the importance of understanding how to move beautifully. And I think kettlebells are a beautiful foundation for that. They're just a foundation. There's only so much that happens with, the type of movement that is really there for kettlebells, but it allows you to start developing in a fuller way, both spiritually, mentally, physically.
Yeah, I agree totally that the ability to express the human body through movement, kettlebell's a fantastic tool to do that, because if a person needs to be stronger, it's there. If a person needs to be more mobile, the same tool. And I think that if I'm remembering right, there was a period of time way back when that you threw out the phrase that the kettlebell is like the Swiss Army knife. It's one tool with multiple purposes. And from a very personal standpoint for myself, I don't know how much, I don't remember how much you and I have talked about this, but it's October right now. Back in February of this year, I rolled my truck.
Oh, yes.
A car crossed over the center line. I swerved off the road, didn't realize I was coming up on a curve, rolled the truck, and ended up at the bottom of a hill in a creek, lying on the side. Like there was water right here. And it was maybe this deep, maybe 6 or 8 inches deep. But, and obviously I've gone through and played all of the bad things how that could have turned out if it had been flooded, and as it tends to do here sometimes, and I landed in 3 feet of water instead of 6 inches, how would things have turned out? But all that to say, when the paramedics arrived, I had gotten out of my seatbelt, that I had stood up, and I sort of scanned my body mentally and went through part by part to see if anything was seriously damaged. And all I came away with was like 2 or 3 stitches in my elbow and a couple of staples in the top of my head. And those were gone 6 days later, and that was all the physical injury that I suffered as a result of that. In the ambulance ride to the emergency room, the paramedic, I think he might have noticed my tattoo, and I know that part of what those people do is they keep you engaged in the conversation to be constantly assessing cognitive function and whether things are about to go downhill. So he's engaged me in conversation. We started talking about kettlebells and working out. And I told him about my history and about how I had done those things and how that led me to becoming a performing strongman and meeting, Bud Jeffries. I would not have met Bud Jeffries, who got me started on the path of being a strongman, had it not been for the RKC.
Mm.
Bud introduced me to Dennis Rogers, and I've told that story over and over again. And so I was explaining to him that these are things that I've done over the past many years. And, there was years ago, there was Iron Shirt and Iron Body Qigong and Yi Jin Jing isometric stuff that I did for a long time and still practice
Hmm.
sometimes. And he said, paraphrasing him, but it's pretty close to an actual quote. He said, if I see about 3 or 4 recs like this a month, and people just don't walk out of that and climb up the hill. Because I climbed up
Wow.
the hill and then got in the ambulance, and then they put the neck brace thing on me. They had to cut the windshield out, and I had to climb through where the windshield was
Damn.
and climb up a hill. Yeah. And he said, people just don't walk away from that the way that you did. If your training didn't save your life tonight, it definitely kept you from being seriously injured.
Mm.
And so uh, that was that incident and the brush with mortality that we all have as we get a little bit more up in years and thinking about things, when we realize that we've got less days in front of us than we have less in front of us than we have behind us. And me with a young child, there was a big perspective shift on me for that. And it was, me being the kind of guy that looks for the good in any situation.
Yeah,
I
me too.
Yeah, I started thinking at that moment, like that night in the hospital, I really miss working with people, coaching people, training people, helping them get stronger, helping them move better. And within a few weeks, I had picked up some clients now because I had completely gotten out of that
Mm.
in terms of training people physically. And now that's, here we are less than a year later, just a little over 6 months later, and I'm back involved in it. And I'm doing everything that I can to spread this strength message that goes
Mm.
back to our initial meeting and even before that, where um, the physical definitely has that interplay with the mental and emotional and the
Mm.
spiritual. And the inverse is also true. Like I had an incident. I haven't talked about this publicly at all, but I had an incident maybe a month and a half, 2 months ago. We went to this county fair, and my son loves riding rides. And I got on this ride that I had ridden with him before. It's one of the rides where you stand up. It's like this big circular cylinder type thing. You stand up in it, and it spins, and the centrifugal force pushes you back against
Oh
the
yeah. Yes.
then an
Yes.
arm raises it up and you go up to 70 degrees or whatever. And so at the top you get a little bit of loss and you start to fall, and then but the centrifugal
Oh.
force keeps you in place. And
Hmm.
about 30 seconds into that, I realized that the being slung side to side and thrown back, from a neurological standpoint, I was reliving rolling the truck
Oh, wow.
and
Wow.
also trying to have fun with my son at the same time. And so
Wow.
what I had to do in that moment was relax and scan my body. And if I felt something tighten up, intentionally send relaxation there. If I
Mm.
felt like I needed to tense up because of where we were in the the cycle
Hmm.
of the thing happening, I could tense up and feel safer there too.
Yeah.
But that trauma, as you talked about, um, mentally, I can talk about it, no big deal. Physically, my body, as the title of the book goes, has kept score, and there's still stuff for me to do with my nervous system to sort of clear that out, in both nervous system and
Oh,
energetic.
totally. That's
But
fascinating.
all of the stuff that I've learned and practiced over the years from every strength discipline that I've dipped my toe into the water has come into play over these past few months in various different iterations, like that. It's things that you don't normally think about. I'm going to go pick up a kettlebell and I'm going to get strong, or I'm going to get ripped, or I'm going to,
Hmm.
do this many snatches in this time period or whatever. And that's really not what it's about when we get down to it. And I owe a great deal of not only the success that I've had over the years, but like just the enjoyment of life that I have at this point. to the training and to the people who have helped shape my training. And obviously, you're one of those people because when you had that vision in the late 90s, early 2000s, like, yeah, can we make a different design of kettlebell and take it to market and see how it goes? Yeah, let's try that. If you
Hmm.
hadn't done that, then who knows how things would have played
I
out
know. Yeah.
for myself. So I wanted to look you in the eye virtually and thank you for that part of it because without that, who knows how it would have played out.
I love what you were saying about the contribution to handling the trauma and how there's still some trauma sitting there. It reminds me, do you know someone called Peter Levine, um, Waking the Tiger?
That
He's
sounds familiar.
someone who's developed a whole therapy for trauma that relates to shaking practices. And his big insight, big example is um, a cheetah or a tiger is chasing down an antelope. At a certain point, the antelope realizes this isn't working, and it fakes its death and it collapses on the ground. And the tiger, hopefully, what happens is it doesn't eat the antelope at all on the spot. Maybe it drags it off in the bushes. I'll come back for you later. The antelope then wakes up and starts a shaking practice. And all animals do this when they've gone through trauma, all animals except humans. They shake out all the trauma that they just experienced because when the antelope hits the ground like that, all of the fear and anger and anxiety and whatever has been rushing through their bodies is held in the body. And unless that is shaken out very quickly, it's going to affect you down the road. So birds do it, dogs do it, cats do it, all animals do it. Humans are so focused mentally, they're so cognitively in their, so much in their heads that we shut down. We don't allow ourselves to shake it out when we get traumatized. And down the road, we pay the consequences.
Yeah.
You with your prior training.
What did you say the title of that book was? Because I want to look it up. But Peter Levine.
Waking the Tiger, and
Waking the Tiger.
the author is Peter Levine. He's in Colorado, I believe, and
I'll definitely check that out. Yeah.
yeah, just fascinating stuff. And it fits that you would have been able to handle your trauma very well, mostly because of your practices,
Well, yeah,
your
and there
movement
was
practices.
there's been between the two incidents of flipping the truck and the thing on the ride, I've consciously done things both mentally in meditation that our mutual acquaintance Matt Fury has been very
Oh,
helpful.
Matt, yeah. So
Matt's
you're
an
in touch with Matt?
Yeah, we talk very regularly.
Oh,
He's been
wow,
on the
good for
show.
you.
I've coached him to on how to rip a deck of cards in half. He's taken some interest in that. Yeah,
Yeah,
we,
because Matt Fury was someone that I was promoting originally. I sold his conditioning book.
yes,
Um,
combat
what was
conditioning,
it? What was it called again?
combat conditioning.
Yeah, combat conditioning. I used to sell it through my catalog,
Yeah,
and he and I had a pretty strong relationship. And then Pavel kind of took over,
right.
and Matt went his way very successfully. But
Yeah,
yeah, great guy.
yeah. But he helped because he owns the entirety of the psycho-cybernetics intellectual property. He bought that from Dan
Wow,
Kennedy
wow,
a long time
wow. Yeah.
ago. So he helped me with some of that stuff, but also a lot of the stuff that I've learned just from physical training, kettlebell related stuff, all of that has been very useful to me in
Hmm.
processing that trauma. And then you get on a something like that ride and your nervous system reminds you, hey, you're not done yet.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Still got some stuff
Right.
to clean up in the basement.
Yeah,
But the point that you were
yeah.
making about the antelope, I don't know where I heard this, but it may have been from Wim Hof, who I trained with and
Sure,
did
sure.
instructor
Yeah.
training as well. I know you published a book
I
of his.
published one of his books, yes. Yeah, Way of
Um,
the Iceman.
we were talking about stress and how we as humans very often like to define ourselves by our ability to hold on to stress. Is that,
Mm.
and I'm not sure if it was Wim or if it was somebody at it may not have even been at that event, but it in my mind I sort of associate it with this week-long event that I was at there. But the idea was that if a predator jumps out and starts to chase an antelope and the antelope escapes, 15 minutes later, it's eating grass and drinking from the watering hole again like nothing happened. It's not a year and a half later, it's going to therapy talking about this one time
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
And
Very good point.
so where are we as humans missing the mark on that? And it's like you said,
Hmm.
it's on movement, it's on breath, which breath is the first and last movement that we take,
Exactly.
in my observation. And
Yes.
and I think
Totally.
too that it's compounded because our intellects are such. I think that, and this is just my thoughts on this. I think that we have arrived at this place of being the apex organism on our
Hmm.
because of our ability to recognize a threat, process that threat, and then go warn everyone else. You know, if you go back
Yeah.
30,000
Yeah.
years and you
Yeah.
and I wake up and we're like, we're going to go down to the watering hole and catch some fish, or we're going to go gather some berries or whatever, and walk out and there's a saber-toothed tiger there. Our job's to go back and tell everybody else at the camp or the cave or go climb
Yeah.
a tree or whatever. There's a threat. We need to get away from it. And I think that in our modern society, very, very rarely, especially in a developed country, very, very rarely do we wind up in a place where there is a significant threat to us
Totally.
as an
Yes.
individual,
But we're
as
still wired for it.
but we're still wired for it. And so
Yeah.
I think that the way that shows up now is through perpetual, what I call recreational outrage.
Hmm. No, I
We
totally agree.
we
Totally get
look
it.
for
Yeah.
something and then we
Yeah.
go complain about it on social
Yeah.
media, and
Totally.
it's very masturbatory. It feels like we're
Yeah.
doing something
Yeah.
because, thousands of years ago we were, but it's still
Hmm.
wired into us. And I think that that is one of
Totally.
the reasons that it's so important that we move well, that we breathe well, and that we think, we look for the positives, and that we look for things to be grateful for, even in things that aren't necessarily apparently grateful or apparently beneficial to us.
Hmm.
So I'm glad you recommended that book. I've got some Audible credits I need to use up on that one. So I'm curious. This is one of those things where I feel like we've been talking for 20 minutes and I just saw how long we've actually been talking. So
Yeah,
we're
we've
probably
been at it for a while.
at it for a minute.
Yeah.
What do you see is the next evolution of where strength training is going from your standpoint?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, I'm not the greatest prognosticator, but what I'm seeing happening, obviously, is a tremendous integration with AI in one form or another. I've been seeing a lot of that in in Dragon Door's business. We took on Paul Wade's isometrics device, the Isomax as it's now called, which allows you to measure exactly the amount of tension you're actually generating in an isometric drill. One of the problems with isometrics often is that people don't have a clear idea of really how much tension they're generating. And I noticed, I liked when I would do like an isometric deadlift on the device, it would show that I was at whatever number of pounds of tension, and then I went, oh, and then I tensed up more because I realized I could tense up more, and up went the measurement. So you get what you measure for. They say that in business, you get what you measure for. So it's very motivating to to measure and to see that the measurements are making a difference. So I think I have mixed feelings about it, because a kind of I'm not really a techie person, but I'm seeing everyone and their brother now has, devices attached to them in one form or another that's measuring every imaginable variable in their heart rate, their breathing, whatever. And there's the type of device we're using. So I think that there's going to be that much more integration in the fitness world with these different AI systems. It's kind of daunting and scary to contemplate where it's all leading to. I don't have a clear idea really, but I'm seeing that. I think there's still a tremendous interest in functional movement, and I'm hoping that that will continue. I like the combination that both you and I are attracted to, which is varied functional movement along with isometrics. I'm a very big fan of isometrics, as was Pavel. He Naked Warrior, and a lot of his work is very iso, and a lot of the part of the system in the RKC is the
Mhm.
plank and so on is very oriented toward that. So I don't have anything really beyond that to offer, but that's what I'm seeing happening right now.
And I guess the final question I want to ask you before we jump into the speed round, what what advice would you give to the next generations of coaches or creators or fitness influencers who want to not just make a splash, but actually build something that lasts and has that kind of longevity that the kettlebell movement clearly has?
Yeah, I think passion is essential. Passion is absolutely. So you've got to recognize that you have a genuine passion for it, a genuine desire to share that, a desire to help people that is very authentic, and be authentic in everything that you do and preach and practice. Be extremely consistent, be resilient. Make sure you're going to have constant challenges. You're going to feel like you can't go on. You just have to keep persisting. And I think that if you do that, if you maintain all those mindsets, then you can succeed. But paramount is that you genuinely want to help people, and you are genuinely heartened to see people thrive as a result of what you're offering them. And be very, very human in that and show some love.
Of that, and I agree completely with that. And
Yeah.
back to the point that I spoke on earlier about coming out of the wreckage of that truck changed. That's honestly that's why we're having this conversation. Is that's I feel like I'm back where I'm supposed to be, and just
Hmm.
talking to people and training people. And
You're a cultivator, and you're getting back to being a cultivator who's helping other people cultivate, and you lead
yes,
by example.
I appreciate that. Appreciate
Yeah.
you saying that. All right, let's do speed rounds. Okay,
I'm scared to death. But anyway, let's give it a shot.
it's well, yeah. It'll be fun. It'll be fun. I'll start with something. I have a list here. I'll
Oh
start
boy.
with something that is not that terrifying. What is a useless talent that John Duquesne has?
Excuse me, say it again.
A useless talent, something you can do that like doesn't really
I,
serve a
I
purpose.
think I think that I'm really, really good at talking a lot of nonsense. I'm very talented, and actually, I believe in it. I believe in play. I think I have a great useless talent in being able to be very playful verbally and talk a bunch of nonsense. And I think it's kind of daddyist. It's actually fruitful in a certain way because play is essential. You said something that's useless, it actually does have a use, but it
Right,
doesn't sound like it would be useful.
right.
Yes.
Um, all right. How about a personal mantra or belief that you the way that I originally worded this question when I was most of the guests that I was having on were we were talking about parenthood and fatherhood, because that was the focus of the show for a season there. But what is a personal mantra or belief that you made sure you passed on to your children, who are wonderful kids, by the way, and your grandchildren now too, whom I haven't met?
Be supremely loving and attentive
Very
as a parent. Like what I would hug my children every day. I'd tell them I love them every day. Touch, loving touch, and attentiveness and respect is everything.
beautiful,
In Yeah.
beautiful. What is the most valuable piece of advice you've ever received?
Ooh, um, that's one that I would struggle to come out with, actually, Dave.
Okay,
um, I think that I am someone who is extremely variegated in what I've appreciated. And I would have to give that some thought. So I
Okay.
can't answer that actually right now.
That's a
Sorry.
very wise answer.
Yeah.
Maybe the other side of that coin will work. What's the absolute worst piece of advice you've ever received?
Worst advice. Um, I'm drawing a blank on that too. I think I'll write to you after the fact on those two. Those kind of absolutes are probably the hardest ones for me because of how open I am to um, what people have suggested and but in both ways. So I'm going to have to pass on those two for
Okay.
now.
All right. That's fine. We talked before I hit record, and we've talked a little bit since we started recording about various different music related things and celebrity music stuff like that. So
Yeah.
this is a question that I ask everybody.
Oh,
David Lee Roth or Sammy Hagar?
excuse me.
David Lee Roth or Sammy Hagar?
Um, I can't answer that because neither of them are people that I really pay
Okay.
attention to.
So that yeah, that's they were the two most prominent vocalists for Van Halen. David Lee Roth was with them
Yeah.
from the beginning for the first
Okay.
six albums, and then there was a big to-do and drama, and then Sammy Hagar came in. And it's interesting to me, I can within a 2 or 3 year range predict or guess most people's ages based on their answer to that question.
Okay. So I have a context. For me, it would be Beatles or Stones.
Okay, yes.
And there is absolutely no question. Stones
Stones
all
all
the
the way.
way,
All the way.
all the way. And I can be quite rude about the Beatles. I respect their musical proficiency enormously. Very brilliant, but there's something peppy and schmaltzy and soft about them compared with the Stones.
Yeah.
So I'm a Stones guy all the
Well,
way.
well,
So that would be my
to bring that full circle,
yeah.
after Eddie Van Halen died in 2020, I saw a meme pop up, and it was a photograph of Paul McCartney, and it said, "Someone once asked Paul McCartney what it felt like to be in the greatest rock and roll band of all time, and Paul McCartney replied, 'I was never in Van Halen.'"
That's
So,
a that's great. I love that.
so there's
By the
full.
way, and the other thing about your question about music choices is that I was brought up in West Africa in the jungle, listening to sort of pounding drums, and I got very, very influenced by African rhythms and this kind of hypnotic tribal type of music. So my upbringing, when I was a teenager, I'd listen to avant-garde jazz, I'd listen to African, and then eventually reggae and world beat. So I have a bit of a different musical culture from the
Sure.
one that you've been involved with.
Yeah,
More recently, I'm into Latin dance, so listening to a lot of, to my surprise, salsa and bachata music, and beginning to kind of get into it. But
that's
yeah, so the that I don't have, other than some standouts like the Stones and so on. There's not a lot of that rock and roll to generalize that I'm very familiar with.
well, that's cool. And
Yeah, yeah.
these are always, there's no right or wrong answer. It's just
No, I get it.
that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. Although if someone asked me that question, I would reply Edward,
Okay.
because
Good to know. Good to know.
um and I guess the last one here, this will be a fun one to end on. If you could only eat one thing for the rest of your life, what would it be?
100% grass-fed beef.
And I would come over for dinner every night.
Yeah, and I tell you, lamb is a strong runner behind that. Lamb chops would be right up there too. But yes,
Definitely. Well, I am going to bring this thing in for a landing. I really appreciate you being on. It's been wonderful having a conversation with you. Dragondoor.com. Is there anywhere else that people could go to find
I
what you
think
got
that's
on?
it. Dragondoor.com is it.
And then you're on all the social medias that
Yeah,
are relevant and stuff. And
exactly.
yeah, and John, I truly appreciate you being on, and I'm going to wrap this one up.
And let
Thanks
me
for,
just say, it was wonderful to be on it. Honored to be on your show, and deeply appreciate every minute we spent together.
thank you very much, John.
Yeah.
This is Dave Whitley for Advancing Man Project, and we will see you next time.